of Chicago. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to catching up.
We'll start right in front. Shia?
Can you talk about the migrant issue and what is your policy? What are you going to do? I mean, it seems like it's a little bit scattered. It's a broad question. You could probably talk half an hour, but can you talk about in the immediate future, what might you be doing?
Yeah. So look, it's not just simply my strategy or my policy. As all of you know, that this policy was put into place 40 years ago. Mayor Harold Washington had the foresight and understanding of the importance of connecting great migrations to migrations in general. And Chicago has always been the preferred destination for many people across the globe. And so, look, the city of Chicago is responding to this national dynamic that, of course, that we still are pushing the federal government to lean in a little bit more to provide the support that is needed, whether it's in Houston, Chicago, New York, all over the globe, all over the country, or Denver. That having a real partnership with all levels of government is critical. Now, as far as what our task is here in the city of Chicago, my position has not changed, that transitioning individuals out of police stations is still top of mind. Finding more adequate places for shelter for families, that is top of mind. Having full wraparound services for families who wish to call the city of Chicago their home, that is still top of mind. And we have put in place many more facilities online to help families transition. Look, no one should be living in police stations. It's just that no one should be.
What happened to the people to move because of Lollapalooza seems pretty unacceptable to a lot of people.
What are you referring to?
How people were just cleared out. Garbage trucks came and just took all of their stuff away. That's an inaccurate depiction of what happened. No one was moved as a result of Lollapalooza. We are moving people transitioning people into shelters. As a city, do we want people living in police stations? Is that acceptable? It's not. That looked like transitioning. That looked like picking up their stuff and putting it in the garbage.
Well, what it looked like to you versus what it is, that is something that you have to work through your own interpretation. What I'm saying, and what I've always been saying, is that police stations are not a place for people to live. And so we're going to continue to work hard to make sure that the dignity and humanity of individuals is respected. In fact, individuals on the ground, organizers who have been providing mutual aid, helped assist those families, all of whom understood and knew that where we were transitioning them to the armory, that they were all thrilled that we are providing far more stability for those families, while also making sure that we're providing all the support that's needed for families who've been here. Thank you.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes.
I guess the first one I want to ask is, can you address the whole issue of having these meetings with the press? When I look at the press releases that come out on a nightly basis, it seems approximately 90% of the emails say B-roll only. That might not seem to people out in the public as being accountable and responsible and asking questions about what's going on in the city you're leaving. So why aren't we seeing you out more often to take questions like today, which we appreciate?
So I feel like that's already two questions. One question is, why are you not answering more questions from the press? And then there's another question that you're asking is, how do you balance the work that I have to do to make sure that I'm available for the people of Chicago? That's how I'm interpreting your question. And so you all know I have a very full schedule. And the people of Chicago want their mayor to show up in communities. And that's what I'm doing. Now, as far as being able to have more interactions with you all, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do that. We're doing it now.
Appreciate that. Look forward to seeing you. National Night Out last night. The FOP calls it a slap in the face that you did not do what mayors have done for as far back as I can remember in 25 years covering news in Chicago. You didn't attend a single National Night Out event last night. FOP says it's a slap in the face. Why did you not attend any national?
I'm in the community every single day. I live in the community. So I don't have to schedule a date or a time for me to show up in neighborhoods in Chicago. I live in one of those neighborhoods that we all are working to address the systemic challenges that these neighborhoods have experienced as a result of disinvestment. And so since you do get the press releases, Craig, you know just as well as anyone, my schedule is so full, that some individuals believe that there is another person that looks just like me. Now, I'm not suggesting that that is the case, so please don't tweet that. What I'm simply saying is this: my vision and plan for the city of Chicago to have a full layered support of how we engage in community, which when I say full force of government, community partners, all of our government agencies, National Night Out reflects the vision that I've laid out for the city of Chicago, that every single night across this city, we have to make sure that there are full services available so that the people of Chicago know that we are taking a comprehensive approach to build a better, stronger, safer Chicago. And I will continue to do that, whether it's something that is scheduled by a particular group or whether it's something that I do organically, because I live in those neighborhoods that have experienced that type of disinvestment and requires full participation from all of our partners. Thank you very much.
This is a slap in the face to police to not show up on a night that is meant to connect police with the community?
Every day, Craig, is meant to connect people. The fact that we believe in this city that there's only one day that is set aside to connect with people, that is a very short-sighted view of the entire frame of what this city is ultimately calling for. When we talk about the soul of Chicago, we're not talking about a day or an afternoon. I live it every single day. Do you think I have time to take 364 days off? I don't, and no one in this city does. It's going to take all of us.
Mayor, I have 2.5 questions. Number one, it's about the migrant situation. Specifically, is your administration or your deputy mayor of immigration rights, et cetera, reaching out to the county and the suburbs to find any sites that might also serve as temporary shelters? For instance, someone once brought up Oak Forest, the now closed Oak Forest Hospital. Can you tell me if anything like that is being done, if the county is looking to help alleviate the city's burden?
Yes.
Can you tell me what specifically that might be?
Well, we're already partnering with the county. Obviously, the county is providing, if it's not obvious, the county is providing, critical healthcare related services. We've had conversations with mayors across not just Cook County, but the surrounding counties. We have had tremendous feedback, and we see some real support on the horizon. I've had meetings with our congressional delegation. Many of these steps have not been taken prior to us arriving. And so working with the state, working with federal government, working with county government, talking to individuals that I have relationships with as a result of my time as a Cook County commissioner, giving these individual leaders some reflection and some template and model of how they can help stand up the type of support that's going to be needed. And the feedback has been quite positive. So I'm looking forward in the days to come that these collaborative efforts that we have been organizing around will begin to see some dynamic come to fruition.
Okay. And then, when...
Is that the half question?
No, that was
Definitely
one
a
full question. This is one...
Because I was like, we're going to be here a while then.
1.5. This is my 1.5 question. When you ran, of course, we talked about it. Violence was top of mind. So can you tell me what 1 or 2 things your administration has done specifically that prior administrations have not done to help curb violence, and has it worked?
Well, look, as I said multiple times, and everyone knows this to be the case, I'm fully aware of what I inherited. The 90s were especially tough. I remember that. I was in high school. We had almost 1,000 people being murdered every single year. What we know, particularly in this moment, my administration, that constitutional policing is critical. And so I really appreciate, very much so, how many of our law enforcement rank and file members have really stepped up to be more of a system of care and calm versus a system that has unfortunately been deemed to be far more harsh and severe. And those levels of sensitivity as we bring calm and structure to the city, that's That's a unique approach. You know, many people expect, you know, us to treat people undignified. My administration is different. And as far as its effectiveness, I would just say it like this, that some of the trends that we are witnessing, the number of trends that we have intercepted over the course of these first, how long has it been now, y'all? 12 weeks? It's been tremendous. And so that's because there's been a real strategic effort on the part of my administration to coordinate with civic leaders, with community-based organizations, again, with city departments. And so we're seeing some of the fruit of that labor, and I'm grateful again that the men and women who serve this city on the front line are providing the type of system of care that's going to be necessary in order to bring structure and calm in the city.
Quick follow-up, when you say trends, what do you mean? Can you give us an example of a couple of the trends you're seeing?
Oh, you're not aware of some of these large gatherings?
You're talking about the mob actions?
No, that's not appropriate. We're not talking about mob actions. I didn't say that.
What happened
Okay, hold on a second, okay? Respectfully, these large gatherings,
That caused damage.
these large gatherings, just hold on a second, y'all. I promise you, we have time to talk. It's important that we speak of these dynamics in an appropriate way. This is not to obfuscate what is actually taking place, but we have to be very careful when we use language to describe certain behavior. There's history in this city. I mean, to refer to children as like baby Al Capones is not appropriate. So let me finish, please, okay? What I'm saying is that when you ask for very specific examples, there have been other attempts to have large gatherings, and we've intercepted those attempts. Mary Ann, do you have a question?
I just need to follow up, were those children sitting there?
I don't know how old all these individuals were. I don't. I do know that the system of care that we are building to bring structure and calm to the city of Chicago, to make sure that no harm comes to any resident of this city, that we're very much committed to building that better, stronger, safer city.
Have you interviewed the police superintendent finalists, and have you talked to them about this weekend violence? In fact, this last weekend, a 47 shot, 5 fatally, and how they might deal with it?
So thank you for that question. It's a very good question. So we're going through a process now where we are setting up time to take a very thorough, deliberate, detailed approach to how we make this final decision. And so I'm looking forward to the presentations that these 3 individuals will provide. And it's important that we're intentional and that we take our time so that we make the right decision.
So you haven't done it yet, finished yet?
We are not finished yet. And here's part of the dynamic is that the full scope of the law has given me a particular timeline that I'm going to work hard to work within those confines.
Looking ahead to Lala, any idea yet what the economic impact might be, and especially comparing it to this big summer of NASCAR, Taylor Swift, Beyonce? How will that compare, and how are you prepared for that?
Well, Beyonce said, "Hello, Brandon," during her concert. So the bar has been raised at these concerts that all of these individuals have to work hard to go viral. I think that's a nice hashtag, "Hello, Brandon." The anticipation, I believe, for Thursday night is 125,000 people. Now, what I understand is that there is potential for over 400,000 people to participate over these next few days, which I'm glad you mentioned those other concerts, right? Because the fact that Beyonce, Ed, Taylor, I think Ed sold 73,000 tickets. That says an awful lot about the beauty of the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago is well positioned to become better, stronger, and safer. And the activity that you're seeing in the city of Chicago is reflected in how we're bringing people together. And that's something to be excited about because, to your main point of your question, the type of economic benefit that it can lead to, there's tremendous hope there. And that's the soul that I'm going to lean into, that hope. And we're putting together all the measures that are necessary to keep people safe. Thank you, Mary Ann.
And hello, Mayor.
Is that a chocolate suit?
Yes, it is.
I've been paying attention to my Twitter feed. It's all good.
Oh, well, thank you, sir.
You look nice, great.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Two quick questions. One, in light of the way other weekends have been going here in Chicago and will go, have you been able to look at the numbers from NASCAR and draw any conclusions about, again, whether it was worth it or and whether it's encouraging to go forward?
So we need to see more around NASCAR. And look, in all fairness, you know, that was a tough weekend for NASCAR. As you know, many residents on the west side in Chicago in particular experienced a great deal of damage because of, you know, a downpour of rain of that amount and in that time period. I believe that was the most rain that we experienced since 1987. So you know, we're going to continue to assess and analyze, you know, the impact of NASCAR. As far as, you know, conclusions that we can draw and to make some projections for upcoming events, I will say this. You know, I know some of you all know that I spent a few hours in Boston and I had a chance to talk to a lot of corporate leaders in industry, particularly green technology, life sciences, biotech, all the dynamics that I campaign on, clean energy. And many of these corporations are very much excited and interested in expanding and setting up shop in the city of Chicago. We have the best universities. We have a talented workforce, lakefront, 2 airports, trains, you know, black men who wear chocolate suits. I mean, we got it all here in Chicago. Next question.
Yeah, and I want to ask you a little bit about Bring Chicago Home, because during the subject matter hearing that was held, there was talk about perhaps making an adjustment in the type of tax, that right now it's kind of a threshold tax. You go over the threshold by $1 and it's a completely different, and the idea of a marginalized tax was raised during the hearing. Are you behind such movement as it comes closer to being reality?
Fair question. Look, here's the thing. You know, our grassroots organizers, community-based organizations, our advocates, as well as those in the industry, they all have a couple of things that they desire. One, no one wants 65,000 plus individuals without homes. And those who are without homes do not want to see an economy that crashes, right? Because, you know, these are individuals that know the impact of a failed economy, right? And so the industry as well as advocates both want to see us address this in a way that continues to grow our economy while also providing pathways to stability, and stability comes with housing. As far as my position and where I am willing to be nimble and flexible, you know, that's all going to come down to like all of the stakeholders, as well as the stakeholders' desires to see the two dynamics really come into fruition, economic growth and to address the societal dynamic of the unhoused. So I'm committed to continue to bring people together, as I've always said, and what I've been doing the last 12 weeks. And I'm very hopeful that industry and advocates will collaborate collectively to ultimately bring Chicago home. Thank you, Craig.
Hey, Mayor. I saw you at the Cubs game last night. Was hanging out with Andre Dawson better than throwing out the first pitch? That's not my question. That's
Okay, I mean,
come on. I'm just giving you a chance to gloat here. I got real questions, though. You know.
Well, look, I'll say this. I am the first mayor in the history of Chicago. I might be the first executive in the history of Chicago to throw a split finger fastball, and it was a strike. Look, Andre Dawson is great. The 90s were tough. I mean, bless him. And I just happened to have on that jersey last night. So it was cool. My sons were with me, and that's important to me, right? Spending time not just watching a baseball game, but spending time with my two sons. My daughter was not interested. That's another story. But thank you for acknowledging that, because it's important that every now and then as mayor, I actually get a chance to watch a half of an inning with my sons. It was beautiful, so thank you. And they're winning too. That always helps, but go ahead.
So, Gia Biaggi announced that she's leaving Monday. Marisa Navarro's left. It's a little bit before the timeline that you had asked them to give you as you ramp up your own administration. Like, where are we on hiring some people into commissioner level positions that of your own people, building out your own team? Where are we? And kind of the follow up to that is are you concerned that as you head into budget season, you might have one set of commissioners preparing the budget and then a different set of your own people defending that budget before the city council?
That's an interesting question. I guess I would have never even thought to frame it that way. The budget that we ultimately will inherit, who will be responsible to carry it out, and will those individuals there who prepared it, will they be there on the other side of that? Look, I asked folks to provide up to 3 months. Now, if something happens before then they're well within their rights, to make other considerations. And, Gia and Marisa, very talented Chicagoans, and I wish them the best. Now, the team that I'm assembling, it's an impressive team. I'll just be quite frank with you. And it's not because, anything about me in particular, outside of the vision that I'm providing for the city of Chicago, but I'm looking for people who are competent, compassionate, and collaborative. That standard has not changed. I've said that for the last several months. To build a better, stronger, safer Chicago, you need those three dynamics. I'm not writing a book on that, by the way, but it would be a good chapter in someone else's book. But the talent in the city of Chicago is amazing. Mary Richardson Laurie coming out of retirement, John Roberson, Rich Gaitis. We have some of the sharpest, brightest intellectuals as well as grassroots organizers, Jen Johnson, Kenya Merritt, Garen Gatewood. I mean, this is truly a, how do we refer to it in basketball? Well, I think it was it LeBron that started to build the super teams? Or was that KJ? What was the Boston Celtics? Was that like Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen? Right? Who else was on that team? Paul Pierce. Yeah, we're building a super team here. There's not one individual that can win you a championship.
They won a championship the very first year that they started. So are you going to be able to do that in budget?
I really love your optimism.
And then the second question. So, you obviously met with Kevin Warren of the Bears last week. Yeah. I know that you guys had pushed back that you made no formal pitch to them to keep them in the city. But, what is the conversation? Eventually, if you want to keep them here, you have to kind of talk about what the options are. Where do we stand on that? Do you guys plan to discuss alternate sites beyond Soldier Field with them?
Well, what the plan is to keep lines of communications open. And I don't want us to take light of that, because something that I've learned in my work to get to this point is listening to people and hearing their values. That's the best position to be in order to come to a conclusion that works for everyone. As far as getting to specifics, I mean, these are relationships that I'm learning quickly. We'll get there. I believe it's inevitable that we ultimately will have conversations that will be far more guided and specific. But in the meantime, it's just an understanding that the history of the Chicago Bears and what the people of Chicago want to see, that those interests have to align. And so the early parts of our conversations have certainly put us in the position to have another one. And that's a good thing, right? I mean, if there is ever a breakdown and we're not talking, then we should be concerned. It's like being in a marriage. When my wife stops talking, it means the conversation is over. So right now the conversation isn't over because we're still talking.
Hi, Mayor. Nice to see you. So I guess the question relating to crime is, you've talked a lot about it. Have you heard what you're going to do going forward with regards to parents and with regards to their children? Summer is almost over and school's almost starting. So when we talk about school safety, what do you think is next in terms of making kids feel safe to go to school? There's a lot of concern about that coming up. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Well, look, the conversation around safety, it has to be holistic, right? And so, the type of looming threats that Chicagoans have endured over the course of decades now, the threat of school closures, the threat of not having enough educators, all right, obviously the threat of disinvestment, that all of that plays a part in, the insecurity that sometimes gets perpetuated. And so what my approach has been is to create some real stabilization, and I said this repeatedly, that having leadership, CPS, Chicago Public Schools, CPD, Chicago Police Department, our community-based organizations, pushing for sustainable community schools that have created real safe spaces for not just educational growth, but real community participation and involvement, that has to be our commitment, and it is, and it remains. And so I know the concerns are real. As you all know, that I'm a parent. I believe I'm the first mayor in modern history to send their children to the Chicago Public Schools, right? And so having investments and making sure that families, to your point, and children feel absolutely secure in every aspect, it is top of mind, and it requires all of our systems of care to work collaboratively. But thank you for that question. Is everybody okay so far? Okay, good.
Hi, Mayor. Was wondering, was your office aware of the domestic battery accusation involving interim police chief Fred Waller, or Superintendent Fred Waller, and what are your thoughts on that case?
Fred Waller being willing to come out of retirement to serve in this capacity is a tremendous sacrifice. And I'm grateful that he loves the city enough to step up and to fulfill that capacity until we find a permanent superintendent. As far as any dynamics that have occurred in the past, as I understand it, that investigation, that initial investigation had been settled and solved.
And wondering as well, are you concerned that the new general counsel for the Park District is accused in a federal civil rights lawsuit of racist and misogynistic harassment from his previous job in Evanston? And do you think that the Park District vetted him adequately?
What I know to be true is that, unfortunately, that these systems that have had some historical malfeasance, that it's a part of my administration to continue to work to create clean systems of care, and I'm committed to doing that.
And you had mentioned with, Superintendent Waller that...
Is this your last question?
Yes, that those circumstances had, that it had been solved. The department at the time investigating determined that his ex-wife's complaint was ultimately deemed not sustained. There wasn't enough evidence either way to prove guilt or findings. I guess, do you consider that solved and finalized?
Do I consider the solving to be solved?
Yeah, I guess a finding of not sustained of those allegations. Do you consider
could you
that?
repeat your question one more time? So you're asking me that the investigation that determined that there was no wrongdoing and that has been solved, you're asking me if I'm okay with what was solved?
Ultimately, CPD, the investigative arm, they found that there was not enough evidence to find a finding of guilt or innocence on the part of anyone involved. I guess if that is a sufficient finding, or think there needs to be more review, or?
I'm grateful that Fred Waller has stepped up to become the interim superintendent, and the morale that he is building within the rank and file is unprecedented, and the confidence that he has from the people of Chicago, and as well as the individuals that serve this city, it's a remarkable testament to his value system, and we're grateful to have him as our interim superintendent.
Hi there. Jumping back to kind of migrant funding, specifically, budget season's obviously coming up. We're all excited. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. My favorite time of the year. I know. So in addition to, I'm guessing, the city trying to figure out how to set aside money for the ongoing services that migrants need. How do you convince federal and state officials to continue or, fund more into Chicago? Do you, I don't know, go there and ask them? Do you invite them here? How do you plan to do that ahead of next year?
Can y'all help me with that? I mean, seriously. Look, I had the chance to spend time with Mayor Turner of Houston, Mayor Adams of New York, and Mayor Bass of Los Angeles. And we're experiencing this dynamic all over the country. So we are in conversations with our congressional delegation. I've spoken with President Biden a couple occasions, as well as the Vice President when she was here, working with all of our working with all of the agencies that the federal government has the ability to provide support for our cities across America. And as far as like next steps and how we budget it with our local resources, that is something that's going to be debated, quite frankly. Now, my vision for the city of Chicago, as I've laid out, very specifically, is that not balancing a budget off the backs of working people. I'm committed to that, making sure that we're making critical investments to bring about a better, stronger, safer Chicago. That's healthcare, education, transportation, housing, good paying jobs, an environment that speaks to justice, right? That responds to the real crisis that we are experiencing. I'm still committed to all of that. And I met with everybody. I've met with Congressman Delia Ramirez recently, Congressman Garcia, Congressman Jackson is coming in today. I've spoken with both of our senators. I'm working. And I will say this, I do appreciate you all being patient with my administration. I do. And I know you all want to interact more with me, and we'll figure that out. But our brother's working every day.
Switching topics, what's your position on the proposed $402 million People's Gas rate hike, which comes out to be about an extra $12 a month for customers? Do you see it as necessary to move toward clean energy, or? We
have to move towards cleaner energy, so that's, I'll go ahead and answer your third question first. We have to move towards cleaner energy, and again, that's why I was grateful the time that I had with some really innovative thinkers around the globe around how Chicago can be a hub for that. And people are excited about bringing those businesses to and corporations being the headquarters right here in Chicago. As far as ComEd and this particular dynamic, this proposal, look, if there's any mayor that knows the challenges of being able to pay your utilities, I'm that dude. So working hard to make sure that there is a comprehensive plan to alleviate pressure from working people to have to be on payment plans in order to be able to survive. That's not sustainable. And so we're bringing people together, like I said, whether it's pensions, whether it's ComEd deals, whether it's Bring Chicago Home. If you don't get anything else from this press conference, I'm bringing people together, and I'm working every day. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Could you give us some more specifics about what additional security and transit measures will be in place at Lollapalooza, given that the festival is allowing 15,000 more attendees per day?
Mm-hmm. The OEMC, first of all, they've done a remarkable job over the course of these 12 weeks of getting me up to speed. As far as the specifics, most of the operation or operations that we've put forth, Sueños Fest, again, these other major concerts, using all of our utilities, and, officers on bikes, making sure that there are consistent checkpoints so that we're able to better manage, where people are flowing, that those particular dynamics are well in place. Scaling up, of course, because we are anticipating a larger crowd, but I am confident that the structures that have been put in place is going to make for an incredible these next 5 days.
Half a question. Do you plan to attend?
All right. So I do need, seriously, to spend a little bit more time with my family. I do. School starts in a few weeks. But I hear that there are some people who want to meet me. I mean, because here's the thing, though. It's like within your first 12 weeks, it's like Dennis Rodman, it's Andre Dawson, Beyonce is saying hello to me. It did make me blush a little bit. So now, like, I'm becoming popular because other major stars are saying, like, what's going on in Chicago, that people are excited about it. So, I'll spend a little time there, but, this weekend, my team has worked very hard. I don't want to tell anyone, but, I might be able to go to an amusement park this weekend and celebrate with my family.
My second real question. There's a lot of discussion over the past year about the city turning over public spaces, public parks, to private interests for things like music festivals, for NASCAR, and whether or how the city could be getting more out of these private interests. Do you share those concerns about public access to public parks and how long private interests are taking over those spaces? And do you plan on returning to those private interests to try to get more for the city?
I hope it's not a surprise. This next statement should not be breaking news. I believe in public accommodations. The good of the public has to be maintained and protected so that we can ultimately serve the interest of people. And because we have such a beautiful landscape, I understand why there are corporations that want to have access to these spaces. There's been some discussion about how to do this in a balanced, constructive way with some consistency. And so those dynamics are being explored with great sensitivity.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
So as far as, on the migrants, I had a question, which is, in New York, the mayor, Eric Adams, is actively telling migrants, don't come here. We can't guarantee that we'll be able to shelter you. Do you see a day like that coming in Chicago at any point? Is there a top line of, we cannot care for 6,000 migrants. We can't care for X. Is there a number? And what do you think of the message that Mayor Adams is sending and whether or not that can happen here?
Look, I had a chance to spend some time, like I said, with 3 other mayors of the larger cities in America. And, what New York has embraced over these last several months, I believe they're up to almost 100,000 migrants. And so, I can't speak for his decision, but I certainly, have used his, as well as Mayor Bass's and Mayor Turner's experiences as a way to reflect on that very question. And here's what I'm committed to doing. Honoring the law of being a sanctuary city, and building systems of care that provide a pathway with dignity for individuals who are seeking refuge and hope here in the city of Chicago to find a real experience that leads them to a healthy life. As we build that structure, I'll be better prepared and positioned to be able to have an assessment on how we move forward beyond that point. Now, as I said before, I don't remember who asked this question. I think it might have been you, about talking to other villages around the city of Chicago and the collar counties. What I'm encouraged by is that people recognize that it is not just on the city of Chicago to hold this moment, that we all get to play a part, and people are responding to those calls, and we're looking forward to building the type of consensus that's going to be needed so that we don't necessarily have to rely upon one city to respond to this moment.
I have a separate topic, but I just want to follow up on this about, Andre Vasquez, Alderman Andre Vasquez was talking about, the concern that as the Democratic National Convention comes up next year, we're going to have people, Texas, ramping up the amount of migrants that we have. So, we have these logistical challenges, and then we also have our ideals, and balancing those is a challenge. But it sounds like you are weighing that and what it looks like practically too.
Well, what it looks like, in a practical way, I mean, that's something that, I was weighing April 4th. But even before that, right, preparing for, what I knew was inevitable, that I was going to win. I mean, everybody knew I was going to win, right? But, look, our values are our values. And that's why I do know that using this moment and this opportunity to have hard conversations that this city has been retreating and avoiding, I'm not going to flinch. And here's why. Look, we just did a full scope of closed schools. I asked my team to go back, look one more time, just to see what's available. The harm and the damage that I inherited because of a political decision that was rushed. You have schools now that are in the middle of neighborhoods that have $12, $14, $15 million of damage. Now, I know there's a couple of publications that have done some stories on this. I didn't need 10 years to take place in order for us to be able to project this outcome. We said it then. It was racist. To get back to AD's question, this move to privatization has caused tremendous pain and harm in this city. And when I'm going across this city, working hard every day, talking to every single neighbor that I can come across, they recognize that in this moment, we have to have these tough conversations about how our neighborhoods have been divided. That's the only reason why I'm pushing back and challenging how we characterize these moments. I don't want 20 years from now, the next generation to look at how we cover this moment and say, what were they thinking? It's why I invoked George Wallace. The comments that he made 50 years, 60 years ago, saying that getting at the root causes of crime, that President Johnson was making excuses that a 10-year-old boy, black boy, did not have enough watermelon to eat. Now imagine if they would have gotten at the root causes 50 years ago. And so I'm glad you raised that question, because it's important for us to not just simply think about the practical response in this moment. Quite frankly, that's not the hardest part of the job. The challenge in this moment is to make sure that we don't repeat the sins and the failures of the previous administrations and the previous generation. And so whether we find all of the right spaces for families, the fact of the matter is we have 25 buildings that have been gone unattended in the middle of people's neighborhoods. Darn right people should be upset. They should be. I'm mad. What was your question again, Craig? I mean,
I think you addressed my question on the migrants, at least for here. You know, I did have on the subject of the South Loop this weekend. So you had about 40 teenagers arrested by Chicago police. There was issues with crime. There was some looting of one store. Fred Waller was talking about there were attempts on other stores. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how CPD handled that situation generally, and what the city can do better so that you get teenagers coming down and they're welcome, but they're also not causing problems. And how do you prevent situations from that to escalating to 40 arrests? And what do you think of how CPD handled it?
yeah, no, look, I like the four-part question there. Look, how they handled it, that's the first part, right? As I said, earlier, Fred Waller, Superintendent Waller, giving confidence and building the morale of our rank and file members has been absolutely remarkable. Quite frankly, it's something that that some people didn't believe that we could do that. I mean, I caught most of my campaign. Some of it I missed. But people didn't think that we can do that we can build the morale of rank and file members, and we've done that. Now, as far as how they've handled it, so that's the first part, how they handled it. To the best of their ability, I believe that they attempted to engage with our young people, with community partners, giving as much warning as they possibly could. And, unfortunately, arrests, were made, and unfortunately, some damage was caused. And the level of sensitivity and patience that our officers expressed, I'm appreciative of that. That is constitutional. That is a system of care. Now, as far as preventative, so let me just say it like this, bear with me for a second. So you all know I've been a public school teacher. And so sometimes you have a number of students who want to find spaces where they can cut up. You have to Google that. It's like black terminology for doing things, potentially harmful to someone or someone else or themselves. And when we would build systems to prevent that from happening, and this is what I've expressed to our interim superintendent. Once students knew that Mr. Johnson was going to be in that hallway, they find another hallway. This is why I indicated earlier, the number of gatherings that the city could have had we not worked with our deputy mayor of community safety, Gary Gatewood, and others, organizations, it could have been even more severe. But there has been some adjustments, that these young folks have made. And let me just be very clear about this. For the vast majority of our young people, if you're between the ages of 16 and 21, there aren't a lot of places where you can go and hang out. It just isn't. You're too old for Chuck E. Cheese's. Well, Liz, personally, if you give me enough tokens, and then you can't go to a club. And so the preventative dynamic is, of course, being far more strategic about finding out when these dynamics are taking place and then showing up not just with law enforcement, but with the full force of government, other agencies, as well as our community partners to help deter and redirect young people. That's going to be a constant effort as we build out spaces where young people can actually come and hang out in their neighborhoods or places, outside of their neighborhoods that are safe, so that whatever gathering takes place, that it's constructive, that it's safe, doesn't lead to some of the activity that, unfortunately, that could lead to arrest. So, again, my heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to the leadership of the Chicago Police Department, building and growing the morale of our local law enforcement rank and file members that have displayed a great deal of patience. And I know we're going on and on about this, but having worked with students and young people, having patience is truly a virtue. It's not always easy. And I believe that the officers displayed a great deal of restraint, and it is not on them alone. Let me repeat that. It is not up to law enforcement alone. And so we need everyone to provide systems of care so that our young people have positive outlets, and they're not, in a position where it could lead to disruptive, destructive behavior. Thank you for that question.
Hi, Mayor. Melody with Block Club. We can't deny that NASCAR just had really bad luck with the weather when they were in town.
But yet you're going to ask another question. Go ahead.
But, even at its strongest, NASCAR is predicted to have less economic impact than Sueños. It also caused a lot of disruption for vendors in and around the park. Residents weren't really a fan of it. I'm curious, how do you justify bringing back that event for a second year? And I'm curious if if NASCAR has given any additional payments to the Park District beyond the $500K.
Well, as far as justification, a real community-led process that includes the older people. I'm going to do that. I've spoken to Brian and to Brendan, to Pat. So that's the 3rd Ward, the 42nd Ward, and the 2nd Ward. Brian, in particular, has proposed an independent structure that can do a full analysis of the economic impact of the weekend events. And so we're looking through that now. As far as, again, the disruption that took place and how the city of Chicago benefited from it is something that we have to really dig a little bit deeper and explore, and then to make sure that there is a real community-led process with the local older people to help drive that discussion. And then a decision will be made based upon those conversations. So thank you for that.
Are you aware of any additional payments made to the Park District?
I'm not aware.
Okay, and just my last question. There is a former police training facility in the West Loop, across the street from Skinner Park. I believe it's 1300 West Jackson. Almost said Randolph. The park would like to utilize that land for a much-needed field house. They've heard that the city is interested in possibly putting that on the market instead. Can you give a status on that? If what the city plans to use the land for? Is it on the market? Will it be on the market?
So we have not made a full determination. Look, parks and recreation is a central part of my vision for the city of Chicago. And again, having a full community-led process in all of these decisions before anything is finalized. That is a commitment of my administration in every level, at every level of decision-making. So to be determined.
Hi, Mayor.
Hey.
Looks like I'm the penultimate interrogator, so I just wanted to clean up some things here. You like that SAT work? I also hate when class, you'll never believe this about me, I hate it when class ran long. So
What time is it?
these are not even half questions. I just wanted to nail down some specifics. Yeah, I know you're digging deeper with these superintendent candidates. Have you at least had the initial interview conversation with the 3 finalists?
So that I would just want you to understand my full process. So as those names were surfacing, and once we received those 3 names, it was important for us to really solidify our internal process, because, and I'll answer the question, I promise. But I just want to make sure that I frame it the way in which I believe the people of Chicago care about, right? Because just by the way, it's not like every day, when I'm moving around the neighborhood that people are asking my timeline on the superintendent. However, too many decisions in this city have been rushed decisions. Now, I know there's a timeline. I do get that, and I'm going to work within the scope of that. But this is one of the most important hires, that you all will assess. And having a process that establishes like a clear understanding of what the people of Chicago want and need, I want to make sure that whatever decision that we made and whomever we decide to hire, that the people of Chicago are very clear about how that decision was made. And so those initial conversations with the 3 candidates will begin shortly.
Okay. And again, I just hope this isn't penalized against me. Do you sense the Bears are close to making their decision?
I believe, look, Kevin and I, we share a lot in common. Like our love for the city, our love for the game, and as far as their timeline, how long is this lease still? Like 10 years? I mean, I don't mean any disrespect to you or anybody else. I'm just saying they got 10 years before they can move. I mean, I think there might be a clause where they can leave in 5, but again, I get why. And this is not a slight against you. I do understand, though, why you're asking for a timeline or how soon, because this city has become accustomed to these type of decisions being made in a moment's notice. I'm a different mayor, you all. I am. I'm going to take my time, because getting it right is important, because what I don't want is that you all push me to rush a decision to then come back to tag me for making a decision too soon that people don't ultimately like. At the very least, that whatever decision I made, that I didn't take it lightly. And I believe the Bears understand that and appreciate that. And, within the next 5 to 10 years, I guess we got to come up with something.
Okay, so here was my non-yes or no question. Some members of City Council, including Jeanette Taylor, say there are tons of issues outside migrant shelters, sex trafficking, drug deals, prostitution. What is the city's plan sort of to deal with what's going on outside the shelters? And how much is the city spending on overtime dealing with these issues?
Now, as far as how much the city is spending as a whole on overtime, I think that has already been reported.
Specifically with migrants, though.
Breaking down the budget, about where overtime is ultimately being, paid. I guess if you just want that, we can get that to you, but I don't believe that's the way the budget works. As far as what the city is doing about it, we're addressing it like every other, challenge that we have in the city. I've had great conversations with our alderpersons, including, alderperson, Jeanette Taylor. She's a friend, and when these dynamics were presented to us, DFSS as well as Chicago Police Department have interacted with these particular spaces creating some real clear guidelines and some restrictions. And the expectation is that folks hold to that. And if they don't, that's what accountability is for. And so we're going to continue to address that and to make sure that we're creating systems ultimately that alleviate some of the tension that's taking place in some of these centers, shelters rather. And it's an ongoing effort. And just know that, we take it seriously and we are addressing it. Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor. I'll be quick. So in May, DFSS and OBM told a city council committee meeting that the city was almost out of runway with regards to migrant funding and that the $51 million item they were voting on that day would only last until the end of June. I know that since then, the city has gotten some more funding from the state and feds. How many months of runway would you say the city has currently regarding migrant funding? And do you think the situation, like financially, is less or more dire than it was back then?
I believe this came up earlier. I don't remember who else asked this question, as far as, how much we are ultimately spending and what it's going to take to create a sustainable system of care. This is why we're working with every level of government, particularly villages around the city of Chicago and collar counties as well. As far as the sustainability of this moment, we're going to need, more support from the federal and the state government. I mean, I believe that's all very clear. And I'm going to work with all of our commissioners, our sister agencies, as well as, of course, every level of government to make sure that we're providing the support for families who have been here, who are looking for housing, affordable housing. It's why Bring Chicago Home is a very important part of my platform and making sure that we have the resources to invest in people. And I'm committed to leading that charge, and I appreciate the fact that we have so many organizers and stakeholders that are also committed to seeing like a real robust response to how we deal with the unhoused and how we deal with migrants across the city of Chicago and across the region.
The reason I bring that up is because I remember the former budget director was able to project at that point in time that the funding would run out by end of June. Wondering whether you've been told a projection most recently and what that
What
time
month
frame.
is it?
Now it's August.
Well, I mean, the government is still running. We're still providing support and services. I can't speak to, the former budget director. I mean, will we have to continue to work and think strategically about, again, how we build these systems of care so that our investments are actually meeting the needs of people? Of course, but you have to do that every single year. And then you have to reassess and evaluate it as you go along. And I'm committed to that process. Thank you all very much. Anybody else? All right, this was great. Appreciate you all. Thank you.